All right, for our first prompt, let's jump in and deal with some font mixing issues. This is going to tie in with the first column that we have. And for our first prompt idea, I want you to take your existing font names and font choices and only play around with uppercase and lowercase variations of those names. Now, you don't have to go through every possible combination. Some of these are going to look better than others. But let me give you this as a starting point. I'm going to pull this over to here, and we'll start off with GoLingo. I'm going to make a copy of it onto my board. So with GoLingo, I've already got it typed out in both uppercase and lowercase. Hey, what would it look like if I retyped it as all uppercase? So there's a variation. What if I did just all lowercase? And there's another variation. I could also do upper and lowercase this way. I could do capital G and capital L, GoLingo. Now, some of these are going to start to look better than others and be worth keeping in your collection. So maybe I like these two as a starting point. The other thing I can do is I can also see what this looks like in some other fonts that I have. Just like I've done before, I can grab my eyedropper tool, type it in, and there's one that actually works out pretty well. So go through and take some time just to play around with the upper and lowercase variations for each one of these. Again, don't have to do everything. If I did something like voice ink, the other thing I want you to do as you're playing around with this, let's get this a little bit closer, maybe I and K could be done this way, is keep it all in the same font. Don't worry about doing any variations in their weights or mixing up two or more fonts just yet. We just want to keep everything in the same font. So there's one way of doing it. I could do all voice, all uppercase. What would this look like in a different font? That's actually kind of neat in itself by itself. You can play around with the spacing of it, so if you need to, open up your character panel and you can play around with the tracking and the kerning and any other spacing necessary to bring your letters closer and farther apart. And we'll do a little bit more with that a little bit later. So right now I'm going to speed through and give myself just a couple of examples to pull from just for this first prompt. All right, now that I've got a couple of different options from here, again, I can go to my character panel and I can play around with some of the spacing to bring these in to make it seem like they're a little bit more cohesive. But check out the variety that I've got. I've got some that are all lowercase. I've got some that are all uppercase. Combinations of maybe uppercasing one letter or one part of the letters, combining things together. You can even play around with the size of them. So if I want GoLingo to have larger or smaller parts to it. So all of this is just the variety that you can pull from, not just in the variety of fonts, but how it can be typed out. And that's what the first prompt is all about. Now to start on the second prompt, I'm going to zoom out and I'm going to keep all of these, but I'm just going to clear them off of my work area for now. I want to have a fresh area to work on the second prompt, which deals with font mixing. So whereas we only did the same font, uppercase and lowercase, now you can take your typefaces and start to mix multiple fonts or even multiple weights of your typeface. So think of them as different styles, sizes, weights, and how all of those can be used to work together as well. So let's go back up to my original pull file. I'm going to do GoLingo as my starting point again. If I needed to, I can zoom in, and let's say I wanted this to stand out. Now I can still work within my same font, and notice that I've got a variety of different weights that I can pull in. So here's one, GoLingo with the Go being much thinner. What if I did the opposite of that? What if instead Go was nice and bold and Lingo was thinner? And you can see now this creates a different little look and feel. I've got two different variations. You can repeat this process for any one that you have, but not just mixing up the weight. You could also try mixing up two or more different fonts. Let's try type tongue. In this case, maybe I'll cut the word tongue away and put it on its own separate line. So now I can deal with type all by itself. I like the look of this one, but let's see if I can choose one of my scripty fonts. Yeah, that looks good. So now that I've got two different fonts, I can place one on top of the other and see how those maybe interact with each other. Maybe not for this font. I'm going to choose a different one. Oh, now that looks good. So there's this. So here's type tongue and how it can be placed. Notice that I also have the freedom to be able to move my type around. Please don't think that you have to keep everything in line. I could easily have type tongue side by side. I could have type tongue on top, right here, or maybe even over here. As I play around with it, I can emphasize different sizes and different placements to go along with what I've got. Let's do the same thing for voice ink. So if I pull on voice ink, again, I'm going to break it apart simply by cutting it away and pasting it on its own separate line. Excuse me, let's do that right here. Ink could be maybe thicker. Now I've got one larger and smaller on top of here. Maybe I can do this as all caps. Now it's styling and looking really good between those two. The final thing that you can start to play around with is to just use individual letters. Let's do it for waywords. So waywords starts with a W. So I could have all of this as just a font by itself. Maybe it looks good as a nice taller font, but I could use a W, as almost an icon. So this could be the logo on top of it. It's larger. I could do it as a bolder font, so there is a logo variation. Or I could use it as just a different typeface. Maybe this scripty font on top of here, placing that in there. So there's one variation. And again, I can see what it looks like on the side. Kind of like it up at the top. So for prompt number 2, play around with different typefaces and how the typefaces can work together, different weights within your typeface, and also the different placements of your words. You get a lot more freedom. Group everything together so they're nice and easy to select. Try to get everything to fit inside of here. And again, you don't have to do every single word, just do the ones that you feel like are going to give you some of the best results that you can play around with and see what you've got. But give yourself a variety. And so this is what I've come up with after just a few minutes. Playing around with the sizes, playing around with different weights was a lot of fun. Seeing how I could use a single word or a single letter and use that as my point. Even in this case, I didn't even use the word all by itself. I just did a TT and see how those two could work together for true type. Type tongue. Now that I have all of these different variations, I've got some different ways of writing it and some different ways of mixing the fonts together. I need to pick out 3 of my best ones. Now this is going to be the tough part. Picking out 3, what works best? What do you think fits well? This is where you need to go back to what your business is all about, who they're trying to reach, what they're trying to say. Mine needs to say that they're international, that they are a translation or they deal with language, they are a technology related company. All of those need to be something that's going to be very important and very worthwhile in keeping. I think in mine, the ones that I really liked, I love this type tongue. I'm going to make a copy and pull it over here inside of my font mixing column. That's where all of these are going to go. I can scale it down, and I want to put it kind of in the center and have a little bit of a border around it. In other words, don't fill it all the way out. Certainly don't go outside the edge. Make it look nice and inside of there. I like that one. I really like the way this voice ink turned out. So maybe I'll place him there. Again, scale down. And I really like the way just Go Lingo by itself looked good with this particular font. There's nothing wrong with having a font just by itself, typing out the name of one of your business choices. Now, just because I chose 3 of them doesn't mean I can't use the rest of these later on. So I'm going to keep all of these together on one layer, and later on I'm going to add other layers. You can see where I've been playing around with the other prompts too. But don't discard these. Instead, you may want to move them off of your work area so that later on, if you need to, you can come back, we can pick up those ideas, but we haven't lost them for our future little prompts. So that's the font mixing prompt 1 and 2 that should go in this first column.